Good morning, Sharks. I'm Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com. If you want some poker news, all of the poker news, check out PokerNews.com. And today, we're going to be reviewing a hand from the $10,000 buy-in GG Super Millions that happens every week on GG Poker. Make sure you check out their YouTube channel. I believe it is ggpoker.tv. We'll put a link in the description below. And today, we have the absolute pleasure of watching one of the absolute best poker players in the world play a pretty tough spot. On GG, and to be fair, in most final tables nowadays, the payout structure is somewhat flat. This is especially true in tournaments where they pay a whole lot of the field. Very often, you'll find that the difference between first and second is like a decent amount, but not an absurdly big amount. Whereas back in the day, when I won all these trophies, first place was something like a third of the money in the entire tournament. So let's say you're playing a 300-person, $10,000 buy-in tournament, $3 million in the prize pool. First place would be $1 million, 33%. Nowadays, in almost all tournaments, it would be something like $500K or $600K, substantially less. I got lucky to win when I won. Anyway, payout structure is relatively flat. And in this scenario, when you're a medium stack, you are highly incentivized to outlast the short stacks. Highly incentivized, maximally incentivized. So take a look at this scenario. We have Ike Haxton on the button with a 15 big blind stack, okay? Small blind has about 10 big blinds. Big blind is a big stack. Also, Jay Anderson over here is playing with about an 18 big blind stack. Everybody else has a decent amount of chips. So, in this scenario, Ike Haxton is highly incentivized to try to outlast Marky Aurelio, the great Stoic philosopher. Let's see if he plays very Stoic in this scenario. Okay. When I initially looked at this spot, I thought this is probably a scenario where you're going to want to go all in or fold. Why? Because in the spot, if you raise and get jammed by either player, you have to fold, but we have a reasonable blocker, decent hand. If you raise, you're going to get shoved on by the big blind a lot, or the big blind is going to call a lot. But is that really the right play? Do we want to risk going broke in 7th place? I want you to take a second and think about this and ask, what would you do in this scenario? Would you just fold and let it go? Would you limp? Would you min raise? Or would you shove it all in? Pause the video and write what you would do in the comment section below. This is a fun spot because really I think all options are reasonably viable. If you think Marky Mark's going to play especially poorly here in the small blind, if you fold, maybe you just want to fold and let him play a lot of pots out of position against the big stack. That'd be fine. That said, I do think Ace-6 is a hand you want to play. And from a GTO point of view, at the final table, you very often do want to raise a lot of hands with an ace, even Ace-X offsuit, because it blocks your opponent's calling range, right? When you have ace in your hand, it's less likely they have ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, ace-10, etc. So you're going to find that at the final table especially, the Ace-X goes up in value. So I presume you should probably play this. And the question is, do we shove, limp, or min raise? There's a program called ICMizer that I use. You can check it out at jlpoker.com/ICMizer. There's also a few videos on YouTube where I go through and explain how to use the program. I ran this spot, and it turns out in Ike Haxton's scenario, shoving the ace-6 offsuit wins you 0.03% of the prize pool. Okay? Marginally profitable push. But from a GTO point of view, assuming there's not any incredibly shallow stack, just because this play is profitable does not mean it is the best play. You're going to find what GTO very often does is it takes a lot of these hands on the cusp of playability, and it min raises them. So things like King 6 suited, King 7 suited, King 8 suited, maybe King 9 suited, Queen 9 suited, 10 8 suited. Basically anything that's 0.05 or less down to 0, maybe down to 0.01 or so, and it min raises it. So all these ace-x down here would be min raised. Then a lot of the medium strength hands are shoved, right? Like ace 10 suited, ace jack offsuit, king queen offsuit, king queen suited, etc. And then the best hands are min raised as well. Maybe something like jacks and better, maybe 10s and better, something like that. And ace king. Maybe ace-queen suited, maybe ace-queen offsuit. With the idea that you're going to min-raise and call off with your best hands, you're going to min-raise and then fold with your junky hands, and you are going to shove the hands that have pretty good equity. You can develop GTO charts using a program called Munker Solver. I don't have those available right now. So this is an easy way to go about figuring out what to do roughly in this spot. And I think ace-6 offsuit is a hand that is like barely profitable to shove, but it's probably more profitable to either limp or min raise. The problem with limping, though, is that you let the big blind see the flop for free. Small blind can even call. If you limp, you may still just get jammed on. Whereas when you fold, you do have some fold equity against both players, which is nice. And, you know, you get to drive the action a little bit. So I think in this spot, you should play the hand. The question is a play better or worse than the other? I think as the big stack gets more and more aggressive, you should probably just rip it all in. Because if you limp, he's going to shove. If you raise, he's going to shove. And if you, or call and then be very aggressive post-flop, which is not really what you want unless you flop exactly an ace, right? So I think this is a spot where I would tend to just shove, especially as I thought I would face aggression more and more often. But that could be a bit of a leak. Just because a play is profitable does not mean it is the most profitable option. Let's see what Ike Haxton does. I'm going to presume whatever Ike Haxton does is right. He is thought to be one of the absolute best players in the world. We've battled a few times at the poker table, back when he was playing the small stakes $10,000 buy-in tournaments. To be fair, this is a $10,000 buy-in tournament, but he can play from the comfort of his own home. On his spare time, probably this is the 20th table he has running on the side. Marky Mark has a cool situation. You can actually use ICMizer here to some extent. It's not going to be perfect. But what you can do is you can have this player raise, and now we can ask what we would do in this scenario in the small blind. We're probably going to want to edit the min-raising range. This has the min-raising range being this, which I think is probably not accurate at all. I think a lot of these hands in this vicinity shove. So, I mean, again, this is a spot where you have to ask, like, what is the opponent actually min-raising? If we are min-raising maybe stuff like this, let's just pretend, right? I mean, who knows what's actually min-raising? I think these hands are probably shoving. Let's just pretend we're going to be min-raising this, which again, could be wrong, could be right. Who knows what it actually is. Okay, fine. So now we can click calculate, and then click ICMize, and it will tell us which hands the small blind should now shove. And you can see here, if that's the strategy, this right here, that the player on the button is using, then the player in the small blind can shove profitably with this range. And again, just because a play is profitable does not mean it's the most profitable, but I think here, Queen Jack is probably just a reasonable shove. Also, as you get shallower and shallower stacked, you have to be more and more comfortable getting it all in just like barely profitable spots. When you're a medium stack or a big stack, though, you don't want to get it in a barely profitable spot. But you see here, Queen Jack offsuit wins. It's probably a shove. When you are the shallowest stack in this scenario, you definitely should consider ripping it in. The only exception to that is that if you think these two players are very likely to collide and play a big pot, right? Like if you think Isaac goes broke here, I don't know, 20% of the time, then maybe you want to fold. But I think this Queen Jack's just a shove. You don't love it, but I think it's a shove. The only time I would not shove here is if I thought Isaac's range was exceptionally strong. But I mean, we see him raising the ace-6 offsuit, so it's clearly not all nuts. Jack 10 can call or shove, either one, depending on, again, what he thinks about Isaac's strategy. King 8-6. Seems like a reasonable spot to let it go check or bet small. It's always tough if you bet here and get shoved on because you have to fold. You don't want to go around folding the middle pair, but you have to realize that whenever you get shoved on, it's going to be against a king, an 8, a 6, or a draw, right? And you're roughly flipping against that, and you really don't want to get it in roughly flipping when there is a short stack here and another few other players who are medium stack. So this is the problem with the hands like ace-6 to begin with, is that when you do min-raise and get a marginal flop, you often are pretty much forced to let it go check or bet small and then open yourself to getting raised. So I like the check. If you get to check it down, you probably win. If you face lots of aggression, maybe even then you still win if your opponent's hyper-aggressive. Best crypto goes for the bet. What is the best crypto? Let me know in the comment section below. Oh my God. Can you feel all the comments coming in from the crypto people right now? I prefer the Ethereum. All right, let's see. Please don't unsubscribe because I said that. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe. I would appreciate it. Isaac calls the turn, pretty obviously. You're not looking to fold on the turn. And this is where we find ourselves on the river. Best crypto has a pretty easy bet in this spot. And the question is, does he shove or does he bet big? He does not want to bet small. You definitely don't want to go 120K here. Because when you go 120K, that makes it really easy for Isaac's kings, 8s, 6s, even 5s to find a hero call. So if you're going to bet here, you either need to bet medium or big. The interesting thing about this spot is that Isaac actually does have some 7s in his range, So you have to be careful just ripping it in, because when he has a 7, you just always lose. However, I think in this spot, Isaac's going to have a lot of random 8s and 6s. Like maybe Queen 8 suited, maybe Ace 8, maybe Ace 6, right? Stuff like that. Maybe a hand like Pocket 9s that decided to min raise and get to this spot, that decides to not shove. I don't know exactly what Isaac's doing pre-flop, but this is a situation where the big blind has a lot of 7s. So you get to have a lot of bluffs. I think in this scenario, I would have just ripped it all in, because you really want to apply maximum pressure to the 8s and the 6s. And as you bet smaller and smaller, especially a player like Ike Haxton, who is like good, strong, kind of, like sticky player. He doesn't especially like folding. You are going to get hero called sometimes. That said, here we are. I think this A6 is just a fold, right? The only time I would find a call in this scenario is if I thought the opponent would not value bet thinly. So what would be a thin value bet here? Something like King Jack, King 10. I think those are reasonable value bets in the spot. Those are almost always good. So if you can value bet King Jack, King 10, all the 2 pair, all the straights, all the sets, etc. If you have sets, you probably don't have many sets. But if you can value bet all of those, then this A6 is just definitely a fold, because there really aren't that many bluffs. I mean, there are plenty, right? Like Queen Jack, Queen 10, Queen 9, King Jack, King, or Jack 10, Jack 9, 10 9, right? All those offsuit hands are going to be in the opponent's range. They could conceivably bluff, and they probably will. The problem, again, though, is that we have this giant risk premium. If you are not familiar with the term of risk premium, definitely check out my tournament masterclass at pokercoaching.com. Essentially, in this scenario, Isaac, from a pot odds point of view, needs to be good. Well, let's get out the calculator to be sure we get it right. You all know I can't do mental math on the fly. He has to put in 322 to try to win how much? His 322, his opponent's 322, and 500. That is 640 plus 500. 140. Yeah? Okay. So he needs to win 28% of the time in this scenario to break even if there are no pound implications. But realize this is basically all of his chips, or a large chunk of his chips. He's going to be left with 4 big blinds if he calls and loses. So in this scenario, he probably needs to be closer to like 50%, 48%, 45%. I'm just guessing off the top of my head. It's hard to know this thing without going through advanced calculations, but he needs a large chunk of equity here. So the question becomes, how many combinations of value bets are there in the opponent's range, and how many combinations of bluffs are there? Well, we just said the bluffs that are very clearly bluffs are going to be Queen Jack, Queen 10, Queen 9, which all of those are in the opponent's range. Maybe he jams some suited ones, but we'll presume he doesn't. Then Jack 10, Jack 9, and then 10, 9, right? That's 6 hands times 16 combinations each. Let's get out the calculator so we don't screw up. 6 times 16 is what? Does anybody know? I don't know. It's 96 combinations of bluffs. So we need to find 96 combinations of value hands, or maybe 120 value hands or fewer, in order for this to be a call, assuming he bluffs literally every time. And to be fair, this is a spot where best crypto is probably going to bluff basically every time. So can we find 100-something combinations of value hands or more? Like, imagine this scenario, you find 300 value hands that would obviously bet, then this is just a fold. But if you can only find 100 value hands, then it's like 50-50, which is probably about the odds you need, accounting for the risk premium. So he'd value bet any 7, right? So we have ace 7. Does ace 7 jam pre-flop? Probably, maybe. Let's presume it doesn't. Ace 7, king 7, queen 7, jack 7, 10 7, 9 7, 8 7, 7 6, 7 5, 7 4, 7 3. All of these seem somewhat reasonable. Now, that is, 6 combinations, 6 times 16, but some of those are blocks. So it's going to be like 6 times 13 across the board. Let's just pretend. We're trying to do this kind of quickly because I know this video is already long. That's 78 7 combinations. Okay? That's a lot. Then would he value bet 2 pair, like 8-6, 8-6, 8-5, 8-4. Would he have 8-4 offsuit pre-flop? Maybe, maybe not, depending on how wide he is. I will say the big blind should defend quite wide in this scenario because he has the big stack against the medium stack. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, 8-6, 8-5, 8-4, 6-4, 6-5. That's 5 hands times 9 combinations each. That's 45 more hands. Okay? Would he value bet king, jack, king, queen? I didn't count king 8, king 6, king 5, king 4. That's 5 more, so that's plus 45 more, roughly. Again, this is rough math. 168 value hands. It seemed pretty logical to me. Would he value bet king, jack, king 10? Let's presume he doesn't. That means, in this scenario, he's going to be value betting 65% of the time because we know there's 98 bluffs, right? 160, or 96 bluffs. 168 divided by this number plus 96. So what's this number plus 96 equal? 168 divided by 264. 168 divided by 264 equals this. So in this scenario, I think it's pretty logical that he's going to be value betting about 63% of the time or more, because he may not bluff every single bluff. He may actually value bet thinner too. He may value bet king, jack, king, 10, queen, king, queen if he has it. Probably doesn't have king, queen. Probably doesn't have a ton of king, jacks because he's going to shove those pre-flop, right? So in this spot, it's actually a pretty close scenario, closer than it may appear, because he's highly incentivized to use like every bluff he possibly could have because he has a lot of sevens in his range. And he's the big stack, right? So this is a spot where I think it's actually very close. The question is, what is the actual risk premium here? And I don't know the answer to that. It's probably 15, 20%. So he needed to win 30 or 28. Is that what we decided? So he needs to win more like 38. And it turns out he's going to win, on average, this number minus 1 equals about 36% of the time. So close to a break-even call. Would the opponent ever find other hands to bluff with? Would he ever bluff like queen 4 if he had it, or queen 5 if he had it? Maybe. Maybe. I realize this a6 does block a few value hands. I didn't account for that in my calculation, right? So maybe that slightly skews him towards bluffs. Tough spot, though. Tough spot. I'm sure the comments are going to come in. 15 minutes of talking for one simple decision. This is just a fold. Fold, you don't have anything. Fold, obviously. Oh, but wait, he's bluffing. Also in the YouTube comments. He's bluffing. He's clearly bluffing. It's an easy call. You have a pair. How could you fold a pair? Sorry, YouTube commenters. I must have woken up on the wrong side of the bed. I'm a little bit spicy today. All right. I would fold here, naturally. I would naturally fold here, but going through the math, thinking it through, it's actually pretty close. And if you know your opponent's just like hyper aggressive, it becomes a reasonable call. If there were additional straights available, for whatever reason, I know it's not possible on this board, but if there were additional straights available, like say there were 2 4 straights on the board or something, then this would just have to be a fold. But like right here, there are just a whole lot of obvious bluffs, like jack 10. So cool spot. What would you do? Don't lie. Don't lie to yourself. I would have folded. Then again, I'm not Ike Haxton, so can't play great all the time, can you? Let's see what Isaac does. What do you think he's going to do? Is the suspense building? Are you excited? I'm excited. He calls. Oh my gosh. Call of the century. Ike Haxton scoops a nice pot. It doesn't help him. He doesn't win the tournament. But awesome, awesome play. And, you know, breaking down the math, going through the scenario, it's probably a way closer call than it seems. Usually on a 4 straight board, when you have a bad pair, it's not a call. But in this exact instance, when the opponent is highly incentivized to bluff, it probably is. Interesting to note, if Best Crypto shoved on the river, Isaac would be getting worse pot odds, meaning he needs to win more often. Maybe that would have been just enough to tilt it to a fold. Maybe, maybe not. Tough to know. Fun hand, huh? That's going to be it for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do me a favor and click the like and subscribe buttons below. Good luck in your games. Have a great, great day. And I hope all of your hero calls with bad pairs on 4 straight boards win. Did you know that subscribing to this YouTube channel will increase your poker win rate by 36%? Go ahead, do it. Actually, that was a bluff. You actually have to watch all the content and apply yourself and work hard and put in volume. Sorry about that.